In this video tutorial, we're going to make the Twisted Fingerless Gloves. Okay, so we're going to do the chain cast on. We've already made our slip knot, a little bit bigger loop. So we want to put that loop around the back side of our starting peg. Then we want to take our working strand and we want to just snug it around the peg. Okay, this is the tail. We can just toss that into the middle. So again, take that big loop, put it around the back of the next peg, take your working yarn, put it in the middle, and just pull it tight. Okay, we're just going to finish up these last 3 pegs. Just put that loop around, working yarn through. When you get to the last one, you want to just put the loop itself right over that beginning peg and tighten it up. Just like that. And then we're going to just knit it off. So you're just going to knit off that first loop. And there you are, cast on, ready to start knitting the first peg. So you want to do this all the way around in this pattern for 5 rounds. Knitting, purling, E-wrapping, purl, and then knit, purl, E-wrap, purl. And you just want to do that for 5 rounds. And on the 6th round, you'll cable or cross over these 2 E-wrapped pegs to make your cable stitch. So once I have 5 rounds, I'll come back and I'll show you how to do this 6th round where we cross the cable over. So I've done my 5 rows and it's time to start the cable row, the 6th row. So I do my 3 knit stitches, two purls, and now the cable. Okay, I'm going to show you a little bit closer up. So here we have an E-wrap. E-wrap the first peg, E-wrap the second peg. Now we lift that second loop up. Don't twist it, don't move it around. Lift this one up, place the second one on to the first peg, and then kind of snug that on so it doesn't come off. Then without twisting this or moving it around, just place it on the second one. And then I like to kind of give this one a tug and pull it snug. And then E-wrap and knit off the second one. And there's your cable. Okay, I've just finished doing the ribbed part of the cuff. So now to finish off this color, we're just going to knit 1 full round and then switch to the dark color. Okay, I'm just finishing up that round of knit stitches and I'm back to peg 1. What I'm going to do is cut off a nice long tail to sew in later. We're done with that color for a little while. Now we want to change color. The way I like to change color is just make a little loop, place it on the peg, on the first peg, or the peg where you're changing the color, and just knit it off. And then what I like to do is take either the tail or the old strand, and then I like to twist it around once, like you're going to tie a knot, but then you twist it around again. And what that does when you twist it around twice is it just helps secure that thread so that it doesn't untwist, it doesn't come undone. That just helps that to stay tight. And when I go in to sew in the ends, I'll just undo that. And it's time to remove 7 stitches for our thumb. The way I do it is, this is the first one, so I like to use these little stitch markers. They're great because they're like safety pins, so they're super easy to use. They really hold on to the stitch, and I can just go ahead and take the stitch right off and it will be held in place, and then when it comes time to put them back on a peg, it's super easy. I can just use it to manipulate that stitch however I need to. So I just put those on to 7 stitches, 1 on the first peg and 3 stitches on either side of the first starting peg. And I like to put them on all the stitches first before I start removing the stitches, so that I'm not pulling the stitches out of whack. Like they're not becoming super stretched or super tight, because as you remove them it will tug on the rest of the yarn on that row. And I like them to be, you know, uniform, so I'll go ahead and start on the ends. And like I said, you can just use these little stitch markers to just go ahead and lift those off. And there's my 7 stitches. Now the problem that you'll have is you can see they flop over and they end up grabbing hold of those pegs. So what I like to do is just, after they've been removed, just grab them carefully and tuck them underneath my work. So as I knit, they're going to be out of the way. And then we're going to go ahead and finish knitting off this row, and I'll show you what to do when you come back to this empty peg. Okay, I'm back to that empty peg and I'm just going to knit off this one. Now, this is could be a little tricky, so I'll try to go slow, but what I like to do is use a bit of paracord. I'm refilming this segment of how to cast on those thumb loops because the black on black just really didn't show up very well. So I just did a quick little swatch here to mock up the thumb opening, and I'm going to show you what I do with the paracord. I'm hoping that the black and white will show this technique a little bit better. So to begin, you want to go ahead and take the yarn over around the first peg, just right in front of it. Then you place the paracord over the yarn in the back, so it's just resting over the top, and bring that yarn around the paracord and loop it in front of the next peg, and then pull the paracord up to catch the yarn, and then bring it around the next peg. So I'm just winding it around the paracord in the back. And then you want to lift the paracord up so that it is caught by the yarn. Then wrap the next peg. Wrap it around the paracord again. And then wrap the next peg. And it doesn't matter if you bring the paracord up or put it down, just as long as it gets wrapped around paracord in the back and then around the front of the peg in the front. It really doesn't matter. I just find it faster and easier to kind of do it this way. And then when you get to the last one, you're not going to go back over the paracord. You're just going to go ahead and float it in front of the peg like we did on the first one, and knit the next stitch next to it so it's locked down. So you can see now what I've done is just basically gone around the pegs, around the paracord in the back, around the peg, around the paracord, just kind of looped it back and forth, back and forth. So basically I've caught the paracord in the ladder areas of the stitches. And that's why I use paracord, because it will maintain its shape. It can butt up right against the back of those stitches and not totally collapse or pull that loop forward into your stitching. And when we come back around, we'll go ahead and just knit these like regular stitches, and I'll show you, even though this is the mock-up, you'll see this in the video, how to do it with the real glove. So when you get to the loose stitches, you're just going to go ahead and knit over them like regular knit stitches. You're not going to take the paracord out until the very end when you're getting ready to make the thumb, after the rest of the glove is finished. So as you work, that paracord will just go down into the work and be stuck into those loops. So there you have it cast on, and you've started the next round. So you can see now how the paracord is down inside there, and it's got these loops around it now. Those are what you're going to capture and place back on the pegs, and those will become part of your thumb. So those are the stitches that you'll want to use in creating your thumb. When you get back around, you'll just knit these off like regular stitches. So here's the paracord, and this is the first stitch, and we just want to go ahead and knit it like we regularly would. Just knit each one of these, and it will feel weird, it'll be different, and it will want to be loose and weird back here, but just go ahead and knit it like you normally would. And what I like to do is just place a marker at the beginning and the end of each section that I will be doing the stranded knitting in. So in this one, it's 7 stitches wide. So on the 40 peg loom, I will have 1 peg in between each section of the chart. So I'll leave 1 peg empty, and then I'll mark a peg and I'll count 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And I'll mark that peg. So I know that between these two, that is 1 skeleton face area. Okay, it's time for us to do some stranded knitting. We're going to attach our new color, our contrasting color, on this stitch here. So, like I showed you before. And now it's time to go ahead and knit 3 stitches with our main color. So what I like to do, you'll have some loopiness here, is I like to hold on to the last peg, the last stitch that was in this color, and tug. That's going to tighten everything up and make that next stitch really nice. Now since we've got a lot of stitches to do in our main color again, we're going to go ahead and knit 1, and then we're going to catch that float and pin it down in between the stitches. So now that one is resting just on the top, and you'll see how it gets looped in there. I'll knit 2, And then I'll have 2 more to knit, so I'll want to catch it again. So I just wrap this around so it's underneath. And then I'll knit the next 2. And then it's time to use the contrasting color. And so I'll go back to the last stitch, hold on to it so it doesn't get pulled tight, and snug those floats up. You see how they went from super loopy to nice and snug against the back. And then I'll do my first stitch. And since we have 3 stitches, we're going to go ahead and capture the other color of yarn inside and then knit 2 off. And then just use this method for the rest of the rounds, and then I'll show you what to do when you're done. Okay, I've just finished the final row of the stranded knit section of this the skull, and I went ahead and with my main color stitched off a couple more stitches, knit off a couple more stitches, and I'm going to go ahead and cut the contrasting yarn, leaving myself a tail that I can weave in later. I'll tuck that down inside. So when you're done, you want to go ahead with the rest of the pattern. And now it's time to start this ribbed section. So it's 2 stitches of knit, 2 stitches of purl, 2 knit, 2 purl, 2 knit, 2 purl. And now we just want to go ahead and bind off. And to do that, we knit 1, move it to the previous peg, knit off, and move that stitch to the empty peg. Knit off, move that to the previous peg, knit off, and move that stitch to the empty peg. Okay, we're just going to finish binding off. While that last loop is on, I like to go ahead and snip my yarn and then just pull it out. And we can remove that from the loom. And it looks a little funky when you pull it off the loom. It's a little stretched out. So if you just kind of give it some gentle tugs, I will put all the stitches into their little places. So the next step that I like to do is go ahead and sew in all of the ends, all of the bits of yarn. So just go ahead and thread up my yarn needle. And to close up this kind of a stitch around the bind off or the cast on, what I like to do is look for the last stitch, or I guess the first stitch of the top of the bind off. You can see these, I know it's really hard to see on this yarn, you can see these little V's around the top. So you want to find the first V, and you're going to put your needle underneath the legs of that V. Okay, pull that through, snug it up, and then you're going to look for the second V on the last stitches, and you're going to put your needle inside the back loop of that second V. Pull it down and snug it up. And what this does is creates a seamless stitch. It looks really good. So inside, we just want to go ahead and sew in the ends. And since this will be a fold down cuff, so you'll be able to see the inside, we want to make sure that this looks really neat. So what I like to do is just follow the inside of the first little set of double purls. I like to just go ahead and follow those stitches. And this puts the loose threads inside the middle of a group of stitches so that they kind of blend in a little bit. And if you catch it underneath, it's going to be hidden. It's going to be just tucked away nicely there. And you can see on the other side, you don't see anything either. And inside here, I like to give it a little tug every once in a while. I'm going to sew down to a part in the glove where you're not going to see it. That is all the way down to where you begin the ribbing. So when you fold it down, you're not going to see it. And then I like to just go right over to the other side, go up 3 stitches, and what I try to do is go through, split the yarn a little bit so this is captured even tighter, about 3 times, then sneak back over to the other side and go back down, try to split the yarn and go back down the other side about 3 times. And I give it like a little tug, make sure those stitches are not too tight, and then snip it off. And we have a few loose threads in here where we've switched colors and where we've done our stranded knitting. So here on the cuff, if you remember when we did the cuff, we did a double little, not a full knot, but we just wrapped it twice. And we're just going to undo that. It's very easy to undo. And if you do that, you're not going to have that big knot there. We don't want a big knot in our knitting. That's just, it doesn't feel good, especially on something that you're wearing snug to your skin. So we're going to go ahead and just sew in these ends. And what I like to do is just kind of go across these loops a few times. Just in and out. Again, you want to try to split the yarn so that it really holds on to those stitches. And we'll go across here. Sew down some more. And then back through the yarn itself. This really helps to anchor it in there. And you can go ahead and snip that. It looks great on the inside. That should be very easy to wear. So we're going to turn it out. And to finish this glove off, all we need to do is add a thumb. And to do that, I'm using another set of these little stitch markers, and I'm going to use a different color. Just know that these loops need to go back onto pegs. So once they're all on there, I just go ahead and pull that paracord out. And even though when we created this thumb, it was just, you know, if you were to re-seam this, it would just go like this and it would be, you know, seamless. But because we're making a round thumb, we're going to try to create a couple of stitches from the sides here. So what I like to do is I like to look for the legs of stitches from that row, and you go ahead and find one. Make sure you have all of it and it's not split, and then you yank it, you kind of pull it into the center. And if it doesn't create a hole, then you know you've got a good one. So you're going to go ahead and mark that as a stitch you're going to put on to create your thumb. So we're basically taking stitches from this row next to our thumb to make a new stitch with. And up here, I'm going to take the stitch next to this row. We're just going to pull it over. It doesn't create any holes, so we know we've got a good one. Make sure it's not split, and we'll put a stitch marker in that one. Now this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because what we have here is the ladder, and if you pull the ladder over, you can see that that creates a huge hole. That's not what we want to use. So what we want to do is go right next to that, grab the leg of a stitch, and as you can see, when we pull that over, we're just pulling up that leg. It's not creating a hole, and that will be another stitch. So we're going to put that in there. Okay, so now on the side, we've created 3 stitches that when you kind of give them a little tug, they don't create holes in your knitting. So on this side, again, what I like to do is work from each side down. So we're going to take this leg from the stitch next to this row. Just going to pull that up. That will create a new stitch, no holes, so we know that's the right one. We go down to the bottom, the stitch next to this row. I'm going to grab that leg. Pull that over. I think I split it. Yep. Pull that over. Doesn't create a hole. That's a good stitch. Then the middle, since we're just working with a ladder, we want to grab that leg, pull it over the ladder, and there's our other stitch. So now we have all of the stitches we're going to place back onto the loom, and I'll show you how to do that. For this part, I really love using an adjustable loom like this, and you're going to want to use the same gauge, and it's helpful if you have the same peg size, but if you have a different type of loom that has the same gauge size, then you can go ahead and use that as well. So you want to just kind of fold your glove so you've got the thumb hole opening like this, and then squish it like this so that you just have as little bulk as possible. And you're going to insert that into the bottom of your adjustable loom. Okay. See how I'm kind of squishing that up inside? So all of those lovely stitch holders and stitches come up from the bottom. And what I like to do is place the stitches that we removed. I like to place those first because those are the most important stitches to me. And I like to go ahead and start with that one because I know it's on the side of the thumb. I want my start and my end to be on the side. So we just take each of these and place them on a peg, making sure to be careful so that we don't twist any stitches. And it's okay to give these a little bit of a tug because they've probably tightened up since they've been off the loom and they've only been around a stitch holder. So you just want to go ahead and place them all around. And I do not remove the stitch holder until I have every stitch on the loom and I know it's secure. I think it's just much smarter to do it like that. Next, we're going to go ahead and do the side ones. Now, the side ones I like to put together. So I do the bottom side, top side, and then the second top side over this one. So you'll be knitting one of those stitches two together. That helps close it up as well and prevent gaps. So on this side, I'm just going to put that one on, put this one on, and put this one over the top of that one. I do like to work side to side just to make sure that I've got them all. And since my slide has 2 pegs on it, I'm going to do this along the sides as evenly as possible until I'm down to the last 2. I'll put them on the slider. So depending on how many pegs you have on your slider, whichever loom you're using, you can kind of like squish the bulk of that glove back down in there while you're working. You can use, you know, however many you need to. So that's down to 2 there. And I'm down to 2. So I'm going to go ahead and move this in and line it up with my, oops, get these stitches out. Line it up with my other loops, tighten it up, and then put these last 2 on. And then this one. Okay, and then I like to give the glove a little tug down here at the bottom, pull the bulk out, and then push down on the top. Make sure that all of those loops are really securely on the loom. And then I start to remove the stitch holders. If you take your time and you're just really careful with this process, this should be relatively easy. Really, it's just taking your time, making sure that you are careful when you remove the stitch holders so that you don't pop any stitches or loops off of the pegs. Then you should be good to go. The last ones, so I can be extra careful with those. And now that is ready to make a thumb. And I'm going to leave a long tail, even though I'm hoping that there won't be any holes. There could be. I'd rather have a long tail to work with than to have to add more yarn. Okay, just put the loop on the starting peg and knit it off very carefully. I'm going to stick that starting yarn tail down into the glove, and this is usually pretty tight, so it helps to assist holding that nice and tight, but you might still need to snug that up. And then I just go around and knit as usual. This is one of my favorite looms ever. Here we are to the stitch with the 2 on it. And when I have knit 2 together, I usually like to do them one at a time. It's just easier. I'm not fighting with anything. I'm not popping stitches off. It's just way easier for me to do it like that. The great thing about a thumb is that it goes really quickly because it's this tiny little tube. So you have a much faster result. You don't have to be as patient. So there, I've done my first round of my thumb. And now it's time to bind off. Okay, I'm down to the last 2 pegs with stitches on them for my bind off. Just going to go ahead and finish this up. Cut an extra long tail just in case we need to sew up some holes, which hopefully we won't. And now is the big reveal moment. See if we have any holes. It's very exciting, very nerve-wracking. Here's the one side. And the other side. It looks good, but we don't really know until we put it on. Or we put something lighter underneath it to see if we have any holes. And here I put it on. And no holes. No holes on this side. No holes on this side. Perfect. It's perfect. Cut that tail off. And now we have a finished glove. Turn it back out. Fix it all up so it looks nice and pretty. Pull the thumb back out. There we go. And it looks great. We just made this together. And now we have a pair. So there you have your twisted fingerless gloves. If you have any questions or comments, you can go ahead and leave them for me. You can also join my Facebook group. I would love to see anything that you make. If you use this pattern, I would love to see what you come up with. And this was really fun for me. This is actually the first project I've recorded from start to finish. And so if you are watching this inaugural video experience, I do apologize for my mistakes, my little mess ups here and there, but hopefully it was helpful, and hopefully you enjoyed making these gloves, and I can't wait to see what you've done. Thank you. Bye-bye.